Hi, welcome to today's video. My name is Paul. So this week, although I didn't have the chance to do any watercolor landscape painting, I did do some charcoal landscape drawing and sketching. And I also did kind of an experiment. I just wanted to add in a hint of color into some of these drawings and sketches just to see what it would look like. So I used some soft pastel just to add in a hint of color into the sky, for example, or into the land itself. So this video that we're watching, this is me trying these experiments. Towards the end of this video, I'll come back and talk about the final results and whether or not I think they're any good or maybe not. But I do think experimenting, even if you don't like the final results, I think experimenting is good because we don't know. Unless you try these things, you don't know if they're going to work or not. So anyway, that's the main thing in the video, if you like. But I also wanted to talk about another artist who I find inspiring and influential. And that artist is Paul Cézanne. So he's often classified, I guess, as a post-impressionist. I'm not sure that that label necessarily means very much, other than chronologically speaking, he was around about the same time as the Impressionist artists, especially in the latter part of Impressionist period, and he lived in France. I think if an artist meets those two criteria, they could potentially be classified as a post-impressionist. The four main artists who are classed as post-impressionists are Cézanne, Gauguin, Van Gogh, and Toulouse-Lautrec. And if you look at their style of art, it's all very, very different. But anyway, that's just my little rant about this label of post-impressionism. Cézanne he was around at the beginning. He was in Paris at the beginning of the Impressionist period, at the very beginning. And he did take part in the first, I think, 2 or so exhibitions of this independent group. The first exhibition, they weren't known as Impressionists. That label hadn't been applied to them. They were just an independent group of artists who were trying to put on their own exhibition. But as I say, Cézanne was part of that, and I think mainly because Cézanne became close friends with Camille Pissarro, who was an Impressionist artist. If you look at Cézanne's early work and the sort of paintings he produced for those early Impressionist exhibitions, you can see how much Impressionism and probably Pissarro, how much influence he had on Cézanne. Cézanne's early paintings were very dark, both in terms of the color palette that he used, but also in terms of the subject matter. And I think it was Pissarro who maybe convinced Cézanne to lighten up a little bit, to change his color palette and use some of the brighter colors that the Impressionist artists were using, but also to get outside and to look at landscapes and start painting some landscapes, some happier subject matter, if you like. The thing that I like about Cézanne, like I say, I'm not a huge fan of some of his actual paintings, but the thing I really do like was his approach to painting. For example, he often painted a hill or a mountain. I can't remember its name. It's near Aix-en-Provence, where Cézanne was born and where he lived. But this mountain that he painted, if you look at the paintings, the mountain keeps changing shape. And it's not that Cézanne was painting the mountain from different directions. It was more just that Cézanne was changing the shape of the mountain to suit the painting that he was doing, to suit his feelings at the time. Now, some people with landscape painting, I think they approach landscape painting the way they would portrait painting, that when you're painting a landscape, you have to paint it as you see it, with whatever details you can see there. But this was not the approach that Cézanne was taking, and it's not the approach that I take either. So it encourages me to know that I'm not the only one with this sort of crazy idea that a landscape painting isn't portrait. You're not creating an accurate reproduction of what you can see in reality. It's more of an emotional response to the landscape. At least this is how I view landscape painting, and having read a bit more about Cézanne, I think that's maybe closer to how he approached landscape painting as well. Cézanne, in the early days, he really didn't have any success. As I say, he was in Paris, he took part in a couple of the first Impressionist but he didn't have any real success. So he sort of took himself back to Aix-en-Provence, where that was his hometown, and he basically became a hermit, pretty much. He was more isolated from the rest of the art scene, and he kind of just did his own thing, which is also quite inspiring. I like people who go off and do their own thing and are not chasing the latest trends or fashions, but are staying true to who they are, because I always think that art is about expressing yourself as an individual, and I think Cézanne did that. Whether people liked his art or not, he remained sort of true to himself. Cézanne, though, did go on to become very famous and very successful, and especially in the later stages of his career, he became a kind of hero for the newer artists, people like Matisse and Picasso, the new modern artists who were coming up. They saw what Cézanne had been trying to do as very, very important and very influential on what they wanted to do. So Cézanne is often seen as maybe the first modern artist, or a link between the sort of Impressionist period and the later modern period with Picasso and Matisse and those sort of guys. But anyway, as I say, I like Cézanne's approach to painting, and I find it very inspiring. These are 4 of the drawings that I did, and in some of them it's difficult to see maybe on the screen, but there are these little hints of color, maybe in the sky or in the landscape. I'm not sure if I like them. The jury is still out on that. One of the reasons I like doing the charcoal landscape drawing is I like the stark contrast between the dark charcoal and the white paper. And if you add in hints of color, it's changing that. You're losing some of that starkness, I think. So it's interesting to add in color, but I'm not sure if I like the final results. But anyway, as I said before, it's worth doing these experiments, because you don't know, until you actually try, you don't know what end result you're going to get. Well, as usual, if you made it this far in the video, thank you for watching, thank you for listening to me, and hopefully see you in next week's video.